Yep.
Okay. So the first tool I'm going to talk about, because I already have it up on the screen, is ECL Emma. And it's a plugin for Eclipse that lets you know to what extent the text that you have written execute the code that you've written. And I'm showing you in the context of the ZBAM project because I wanted a project that was big enough to be interesting instead of toy examples, and I only had 30 minutes to get ready. So when you have ECL Emma, I have my test suite, which is my normal JUnit test suite. And because I've installed ECL Emma, I have this extra icon up here, and that is how you run ECL Emma. And instead of saying run as JUnit test, you say coverage as JUnit test. And it runs all of the tests. And then we get a measure of how much things are covered. This portion of my project is the client, and JUnit tests into the client would be really complex and yucky, so we have other ways that we test those. I'm really interested in the part that is talking to the server. And this tells you 76.3, that's really dizzying that it goes up and down so much. 76.3% of the lines of executable code in this package were covered by my test. So covered means that the test executed them. And you can look at inside, like this one is covered very nicely, and when you look at the code, it'll put green on all the lines that it touched, and red on all of the lines that it didn't touch. So that one did very, very well. The messages are kind of boring. Set channels isn't covered. Getting channels. And this is a good example of, in this one, it's just the getters and setters that aren't covered, and they were probably written by Eclipse anyway, so I don't know that I'd be really upset about that. There will be more interesting ones in here. This package is a package that actually interfaces with the database to store and retrieve information. So I would like to know that these have very good coverage. Like, I really like that that one has 96% coverage. That's pretty awesome. If we pick one on the lower side, that's not how you go. So this is the class that keeps track of the main kind of devices that this project uses. When I look at what is not covered, it's database exceptions. Equals, which is also code that was written by Eclipse, so I'm not really worried about it. Looks like we're missing a test. We need a test for getting the alarm level that returns when there is no data and when there is an alarm. So it looks like we're missing a couple of tests that we should have on get alarm level. Another database exception. The SQL exceptions are hard to force it to happen because the database is there and working nicely. So the normal JUnit tests aren't going to cause those to happen. And that looks like most of what we're missing is the database exceptions. So that tells me that I need 2 more tests for this class. So what I would do, in order to raise this number, the part that I care about is these 2 reds here, because there are times when it's returning values and I don't have any test that verifies that it returns that value correctly. trying to figure out is, does this service really exist, or do we have code left over that we moved somewhere else? That looks like we have a service that is not used anywhere. Does it do anything? Yes, it does. Okay, so this would be a great way to find stuff you screwed up. And now I'm kind of fascinated by it, but I guess I should shut up. Do you see the point of ECLM? If you are following test-driven development really well, which clearly we've made a couple of mistakes here, if you're following test-driven development really well, what should these numbers be? These numbers.
100%.
100%. That's the target, is 100%. I'm okay with them not being 100% if the code that is not covered is code that Eclipse wrote. Getters and setters to that equals method. But other than that, it should be, well, in SQL exceptions. Do you have any questions about ECLM? Okay, then the other tool that I have is the metrics plugin. And there are two different metrics plugins, but I like this one. Can somebody give me a definition of what's a code metric? Those of you in the back who aren't listening anymore because I already talked about all this stuff. What's a code metric?
A way of measuring code, like something like codes per lines of code per hour, somebody types up. It's measuring how much somebody gets done code-wise. I can't.
Well, you could use it as a measure of productivity, but
Yeah.
we have advocated that's a bad idea, right?
Yeah.
Code metrics are statistics about the code that you've written. The most common, the one that he's referring to, is total lines of code, or they have more than 34 lines of code. There, that's all better. Total lines of code, 12,723. Some places will use lines of code as a measure of productivity. The person who's written more lines of code has written more code. That's generally a bad idea because not all lines of code are created equal. But there are lots of other statistics about your code that can give you an idea of where are the places that are most likely to be broken. In particular, when we measure, we're trying to measure kind of the complexity of the code, because places where the logic is more complex are places where it's more likely to be broken. So you can look at things like the number of methods in a class. If you have a class that has 41 methods in it, that probably means it does an awful lot of stuff. And perhaps it should not be one class. You can also look at the number of lines of code in a method. That'll tell you how long methods are. And a method that's more than about 30 lines of code is too long. If it doesn't fit on the screen, then if you can't see the whole thing, then it's too long. Because you want a method to do exactly one thing so that the person who uses that method knows exactly what one thing that method does. If it's more than about 30 lines of code, it does more than one thing. And the metrics plugin will let you set targets
instructions per line of code be a metric, or is that separate from?
Define instructions.
Like, when the compiler turns line of code into assembly or binary?
That would be, that's not one that we normally measure. There's an interesting result that the number of defects in the system is proportional to the number of lines of code you have to write. So if you have a language that one line of code gets translated into a lot of machine language, that's actually a good thing, because you're gonna write fewer lines of code, so you're gonna have fewer defects.
Right. I assume performance would be the highest priority.
I think you deal with performance after you have code that works. Why can't I? Ah, there we go. No, that's all right. Okay, well, I can't find it right now, but you can set target values on this and it'll turn the ones that are too big red. So I could set it to 30 and then it would warn me that these two methods are too big. If you look at that as a method, first of all, there's a case that's not covered by a test. And I can't fit it on the screen. Therefore, it's too long. But there are other metrics that are trying to get at how complex is your code, not just how big is your code. Nested block depth is how many ifs or loops you have nested inside of each other. So the more you nest, the more complex your code is. So if we look, this one is complaining about a particular method and saying that this metric has a nested depth of 6 and I have the target as you can't go deeper than 5. And when you look at this code, it's red because ECLMA didn't run it because it's in the client. That's okay. But look at the logic in this code. Can you see why nested depth is bad? There's like some really cool magic in here about if the count is 4, we magically do something different. Unless the column is 2, 3, then we do something different. So nested block depth is a good thing to set a target on and not allow it to be bigger than something.